Elevate TV, advancing kingdom lifestyle.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Gigi Report. I'm your host, Godfrey Gishoke. Welcome to the show. I'm very pleased to have you join us. Those of you that are joining us on Elevate TV, welcome. Those of you joining us on our social media platforms, you're welcome. Make sure you share with your friends and make sure you subscribe and then leave your footprints on those social media platforms, both on our YouTube channel and our Facebook page. This is a Gigi Report. I have a special guest with me on the set today, Dr. Katindi Sivi. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Welcome to the show.
Asante sana.
Very good, very good. As always, I'm going to introduce our discussion and then I will introduce our guest. Then we can get the conversation underway. So stay tuned. And so today we want to talk about the culture wars. Is the church losing the battle for culture influence? How much has the church lost ground? Now, any social observer will acknowledge that there is a growing gap between the older and the youthful generation in terms of cultural values and norms on particularly sexuality, career, wealth, success, spirituality, and all that. You know, the ideas of fun, what is cool, what's not cool. There is a very huge disconnect. So the question is, how much has the church slash biblical values that modeled our earlier generation, how much has that changed? And how much are the youth really relying on those old values that we all grew up? When I say we, I mean myself. You know, all of us who are a little bit older, and you pastors and bishops, you know, you grew up on a very different diet, and the young people are on a different framework. So we want to find out why that gap is and what can be done about it. And as always, I want to remind you that the Gigi Report is a platform for big, bold, honest conversation on a broad range of subject matters: social, cultural, economic, philosophical, theological, politics. Today is a social conversation, and we are probably going to also touch on matters of theology. So let me introduce our guest very briefly before I ask her to introduce herself. My guest is Dr. Katindi Sivi. She is a researcher, policy analyst, and a trainer. And she is the proprietor, I guess, founder of Longview Group and principal trainer at Africa Foresight Lab. I believe these are consultancy outfits. And she's also an adjunct lecturer at Strathmore University, so teaching some of your sons and daughters. Dr. Katindi holds a PhD in strategic foresight and leadership from Regent University in the USA, and she is here to talk about some of our social research work. And stay tuned in, and I believe you're going to learn a lot today. All right, so pretty good. So I have done all the introduction. I want us to dive into the conversation. And as always, I always like my guests starting from you know, a background of your career and how you got to where you are today.
All right. So when I finished university, I had done international relations, and I realized that I needed to be employed in the government for me to be deployed anywhere.
Okay.
And so I panicked, and I started wondering, because I didn't know anyone in government, and we were not connected, so to speak.
Yes.
But God was very gracious, because I joined an economic outfit called Institute of Economic Affairs, which is a research think tank in Kenya.
Okay.
Actually, the leading one. And there I learned how to do research, policy analysis, and I stumbled upon a very interesting project that was looking at the future of Kenya in 20 years. And that was in 2000.
Okay.
So they can calculate my age. But
Yes.
the most wonderful thing about that project is that it was something very different, because we did research from a point of view of history and a point of view of then reacting to what comes to us.
Okay.
So this was a different way of looking at things. And it was interesting because it painted four possibilities for Kenya. And one of them was that Kenya had the possibility of growing to the highest potential because of how it is positioned in the region. And if we got policies like that, we would actually be one of the leading economies in East Africa.
Okay.
And then, but the problem with that is that we didn't have the institutions that can support equity. And so we would have a lot of inequality in the country.
Okay.
The second one was saying that Kenyans are very politically agitated. And if we do a constitutional review process, it would actually be a very difficult process, because agreeing into one conversation would be difficult, and if it disintegrated, it could be problematic.
Okay.
Then the third one was actually saying Kenya had all the ingredients of a country in a civil war.
Yes.
And the argument in that scenario was that we just needed a trigger. This was in 2000.
Yes.
And we couldn't quite find what the trigger would be. And then the last one was almost one that was saying for us to get a visionary or an aspirational can I say future, we actually needed to think about three things: our social issues or our social fabric, the politics of this country, and the economy of the country.
Yes.
And so my work, I found the project already done, and my work was to disseminate it throughout the country.
Okay.
Interestingly, if you remember, 7 years after that,
Yes.
3 out of the 4 actually had happened.
Yes.
So the first one was when the late President Mwai Kibaki came into power. Our first policy paper was economic...
Recovery something.
yes, ERS-WEC.
Yes.
Yes, economic recovery strategy.
Yes.
And if you remember, the economy did actually grow. But at some point, people were saying, heri siku za Moi, all right? Because they were feeling, the inequality, so to speak.
Okay.
Then in 2005, we had a failed referendum.
Yes.
Because we couldn't agree.
Yes.
And in 2007, we had a fully blown conflict because of the failed elections.
Okay.
And that's how I became a futurist.
Oh, okay.
And I actually went on to study futurism up to the PhD level because I felt like it was a very proactive way of leading discussions and, helping people to find strategy before rather than after the fact.
Okay.
And
Okay.
that's what I teach, and
yes.
that's what I actually do in my consultancy firm.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think I haven't interviewed a futurist, and some of the people watching might not know there is a whole career
Yes.
and a whole, area of specialization where you study the future, you look at the scenarios, whatever scenarios, and then you try to model, build plausible models
Yes.
or how the future can be, and that can be done formally, and there are tools, I guess, for doing that.
A lot of them. I'm actually teaching foresight classes as well.
Okay.
For those who are interested.
All right.
Because I think it's actually been lauded as one of the 21st century skills
Yes.
that people must have.
Okay.
Because it helps you look at things rather than, for example, if we talk about, let's say, a political scenario,
Right.
people if you're a political scientist, you look at it from that one perspective in terms of politics.
Yes.
But as a futurist, you're trained to look at things from a systems perspective.
Okay.
So you look at the social perspective of it, the economic perspective of it, etc. And your chances of having a better strategy are much higher than if you look at it from one perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that big picture thinking
Yes.
is one of the reasons why I wanted us to have this conversation, because we want to look at the cultural scenario in our nation, the constant complaint, both within the church and within the social sphere,
Yeah.
where you hear, older generation complaining that young people really are just going in a completely different direction.
Yeah.
They have completely different values. They are losing it. All they care is fun and all that. So I want us to tell us about the research work you've done in that particular scenario, mapping these sort of cultural scenarios where the youth are right now in terms of what they value, their culture, and some of the work that you've done in that area.
Yeah, so my interest in youth actually started in 2010. And for me, I guess, because of the post-election violence and the fact that if you read the Kriegler reports and others, they say youth were at the center of actually perpetrating the violence.
Okay.
And the question became, why is it so easy to mobilize young people? And obviously, as a researcher, you would know, you dig into it. Until then, I realized that the youth demographics is an issue that we know, but we are not talking about in a constructive way.
Yes.
So youth demographics is just saying that if you look at our population, the population of children is shrinking, while that of those aged between 15 and 35 is really growing.
Oh, is it?
Oh, yeah. That's what we call a youth bulge, because what's happening is that in the 80s, we actually had the highest, fertility rate in the world.
Okay.
And so the children born in the 80s were so many that now they've come of age, and we are now at that stage where they're leaving school and asking for jobs. So the biggest demand actually in Kenya is higher education, meaning post-secondary education, and obviously work. But you see, we did so much investments in terms of policy, in children, maternal health, etc. We forgot that these children were growing. And now we are fumbling, helping them trying to wonder, what are we going to do with the joblessness in the country? And so because of that, then, if you study youth demographics, one of the things you realize is that countries with population structures like ours actually have civil war at some point.
Okay.
Because you have young, relatively well-educated young people that can be mobilized because they are disgruntled about the state of their lives.
Okay.
Why? Because they have aspirations. Remember, these young people, what happens is that we were told, so many vijana, mkimaliza mtapata kazi nzuri sana. Wamemaliza, hawapati kazi.
Which now has turned out to be a lie.
Yes.
And let me interrupt you, because I don't want us to lose two things you've said. The latter and the former. The youth bulge and the possibility of civil strife. And then the promises that were made to the young people. So while some of these things are very subtle, they're not really like things that the ordinary person may think that they have impact, but they have very serious impact. So those of you that are following this conversation, you're a preacher, you're a social scientist, you need to know that the things are more complicated than they actually appear. And so some of the challenges we are going through. So the youth badge is that here are the children of the 80s and 90s. Some of my kids actually, and maybe your children are in the 20s, whatever. But these guys have come of age. We promised them jobs, or rather the song was, so many vijana mutapata kazi mzuri. So they are here, they have shown up, the promise has not been fulfilled. And they are the majority in terms of, and they are available for mobilization. Perhaps then, and I think that's why it's good to have you here, does that then explain the fact that our politicians kind of seem to know that very intrinsically, and they are willing to mobilize those young people just to throw stones, the Mandamano. Right now we're living in the season of Mandamano. Speak to that.
Can I even say that what we are also forgetting is that these young people are exposed to the world through their phones. So they have much bigger aspirations that some of us had, or even our parents had. And so they expect so much more by the opportunities that they've been given. And so they also are more demanding and more articulate about their rights and about those aspirations. And so when the gap is so big between where they are and what we give them, and what is supposed to happen, they are very angry. And so because of that, again, they're easy to mobilize. Now your typical politician is happy because they just need to pay so little. I'll tell you about a study that was done by a certain professor in University of Nairobi, and they actually found out in 2000 and maybe 13 that it only cost 100 shillings to actually mobilize young people to, or rather to pay them 100 shillings to be able to cause a problem, right? Like a scuffle.
Yes.
But if you wanted them to kill,
yes,
all you needed to pay is about 500 to 1,000 shillings.
Okay.
So it means mobilizing them is so cheap for the politician that and they need the money. So it is almost like a symbiotic relationship.
All right.
And so because of that, then it almost is like, let's keep them busy, but available for us to be able to use them when we need to for our own ends. Of course, it doesn't come out that way, but the practice does show that.
All right. All right. Wow. Amazing. So let's talk about the values, the disconnect on the value side of things.
So the disconnect here is that, again, because of this phone, there's a phenomenon called globalization. And globalization is a phenomenon where you have this young person growing up in perhaps absolute poverty or deprivation of some sort. But they have, the phone is helping them see the possibilities. So for example, I grow up in a slum area or in a rural area, but I see the possibility of what life looks like for a young person in London, in France, you understand?
Yes.
And so globalization is where you have local versus the global, and the gap is so big. And if you actually look at the mental health statistics, younger people are becoming more stressed out, and they're more predisposed to mental health because of that gap. Because their practical situations and where they would like to be is so huge, and nothing seems to be able to help them to get there. And of course, with a culture of corruption, they begin to feel like education doesn't pay, good morals don't pay, and because it is the thugs and people who take shortcuts are the ones who are getting actually benefits to be able to reach that big aspirations, own the big car, wear the designer clothes, and own the big houses, have money without actually working for it. Do you see?
Yes.
And so those patterns of thinking and behavior have been informed by all these global trends, but we don't seem to catch on. So we castigate them without understanding that nobody has ever taught young people or even ourselves how to consume that knowledge or those aspirations they see, the glamorous life they see.
All right.
Nobody seems to give them a healthy understanding of how to appropriate that in their minds.
Let me interrupt you. And do you think, and I'm throwing in something in the spanner in the works. Do you think then those who accuse preachers, and we preachers, and I'm pointing at myself, who preach that all things are possible, whatever you desire, it will come to you. God is able to do exceedingly abundantly, and we actually then amplify their expectation, and then of course, and the preacher also seems to be doing pretty well, really, nonetheless. So it creates now this utopian expectation. It amplifies it so much. And of course, now even churches, the way they have organized themselves, you see some churches which are largely attract very well off, middle class, well-clothed guys, and of course other churches on the other side. And so it creates so much upheaval. So it's a combination of things. So remember that in the world there is what we call a consuming culture. A consuming culture is where the advertisements that even a 2-year-old that is watching a cartoon, there'll be an advert about something. So that if for me who has a 6 and a 8-year-old, there are all manner of demands, and you're thinking, why are you asking me to buy this? But it's because they're picking this culture as they watch even television or things like that, right? And so that is, no one is explaining how to consume even information like that in a healthy way. So we have the consuming culture, and then that consuming culture is then, it's almost like adding fuel to the fire when you now begin to say, actually, you don't even have to work hard. All you need to do is have faith. All you need to do is pray. Remember, this young person also wants this glamorous life they've never had because it's utopian, it's aspirational. And so the combination of those things themselves are just causing so much disaster.
And there's a book that has been written by a Christian called Joandi, called Redefining Success.
Okay.
We need to start countering some of these narratives and messages by what is success? Because to young people, success is consumption,
Yes.
which is not true. We all know that you can buy the latest whatever, but if you're empty, you don't have fulfillment.
Yes.
And that's why they get to those levels, even as, can I say, celebrities, etc., and they cannot cope with it, because also being wealthy has its challenges.
Yes.
And then they get depression and they get all these things, because in between here, first of all, it's not wealth that is built on a healthy foundation.
Okay.
There's no hard work, so it's come easy and come, it easily goes away. And so it is just a messed up situation.
Okay.
And the message I have for the church is we really need to engage with knowledge. Again, because what we don't realize is that the older generations were brought up in the agrarian and the industrial age.
Okay.
There's a certain way in which we did things. We had to go to a library to get information.
Yes.
So information was valuable to us.
Yes.
These guys have information right here, but they are so inept in terms of communication. They have so much knowledge.
Yes.
But we, the people preaching to them, are not, for example, technology natives.
Yes.
What that means is, well, we use social media, we consume information, but we have another reality.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so what then happens is that we value the information we get, and we know how to consume it because of where we've come from.
Right.
So these young people have so much information, but they don't know how to process that information to get good insights out of it.
Trying to anchor, appreciating. Yeah. So you can have all this information.
Yeah.
You scroll through YouTube, you feed yourself with all kinds of manner of information.
Yeah.
But the reality, there's this brutal reality that you have to go through. You are ex-high school kid. You don't expect to become a celebrity, singer, and a million. Once one of them actually for some reason breaks through and earns $1 million or become a millionaire, social media celebrity or something like that, everybody's so mesmerized and they think, oh, if so and so can hack it, I can hack it too.
Yeah. And it's because of the mindless consumption of information without the reality of it. So in the interviews I have done, young people were saying, we didn't know what it takes to be successful, because nobody has ever taken the time to explain to us.
Yes.
No one is then telling us this is a false narrative and that this is the true narrative. Okay. And so they really need us to be able to break down this information, but also then that they are able to make insight out of, rather than mindlessly consume information.
Okay.
And so we need to engage. And where I was going with this issue about we're living in an information age.
Yes.
But the institutions that are there, whether it's government, schools, churches, were built for another era.
Okay.
And we're not engaging with the complexity of information that these young kids are consuming.
Okay.
And so they're ahead of us in terms of what they know. And because we are the ones who are points of authority, but we are talking to them from a completely different context.
Yes.
There is such a huge disconnect that we are not together. And so they have just decided we are going to chart our own path.
All right.
And that path in so many ways is so destructive. But the truth is, actually, there are some of them who are genuinely very hungry for better information. And they're saying, for example, I wish my parents could engage with me on certain issues. But the parents are busy because we were parented by rules.
Yes.
Don't.
Yes.
And they're saying, in fact, don't give us rules without a relationship. We cannot, our parents didn't have time for a relationship. You knew you were loved.
Yes.
You didn't need to be told every day that you're loved.
Yes.
But they're asking for relationships so that they are able then to be able, because they are in the information age, and they are natives of that, they want to engage from a point of knowledge.
Okay.
And they want you to give them information and leave them alone to make the choice.
Okay.
So that means trust is critical. It means that then you can't give information. It means you have to also be very honest about what you need to say. So something like sexual reproductive health, that I had to be taken to my aunties to be told. I have to squarely begin talking to my children about things that were taught for me when I was a teenager, when they are 6 or 7. Otherwise, I'll be too late.
But because there is the anti-YouTube is sitting there, ready.
Pornography is waiting.
Yes.
To give your child to fill that void if you don't.
Okay.
And that really is beginning to show us very scary trends.
Okay. So I think, I like what you have covered. Basically, you said that, and I'm summarizing for those of you that are joining this conversation, we are talking about the culture wars and how, and asking whether the church is losing the battle, the church as the center and ground of truth. And of course, I'm including all the older generation who are brought up on biblical values. It is possible that we are losing our young people, not because our young people, don't want to listen to you, but because they are living in a completely different reality. They, I like what you have called them, natives? Natives.
Technological natives.
Technological natives. They are avid consumers of information. They make judgment based on information. So silence doesn't work with them, or just waving the Bible at them, or shouting, or just asking them, why don't you get this thing done? So they need relationships, and I'm very, very happy that you're bringing that out. So there are still a couple of other things. I want us to dig a little bit more in terms of so given that scenario, that disconnect, technology being a part of it, the idea that expectations, values have changed and shifted so dramatically, I want us now to talk about how then we can remedy, we can bridge that gap. Right? And so before you get into it, let's go for a short break. And then when we come back, we return to that conversation. So stay tuned in. We are speaking to this big gap between the generations and asking ourselves, where are the values coming from? What are the sources of cultural influence in our generations? And I believe that you're learning something. So don't go away. Take a short break. We're coming back here.
Something leave Jesus this conference and fall upon you.
Pastor Sunda Juma invites you to the annual Women of Power Conference 2023, taking place on Friday 21st and Saturday 22nd April 2023 at the Apostolic House, Kenya Cinema Plaza, Moi Avenue, Nairobi. The theme of this year's conference is For Such a Time as This, drawn from Esther chapter 4 verse 14. Ministering alongside Pastor Sunda Juma shall be God's General, Bishop Margaret Wangare.
There is no other name higher than the name of Jesus.
Friday sessions will run from 10 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. and Saturday from 8 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. This conference will be aired live on Elevate TV and its social media platforms. Women of Power Conference 2023. For such a time as this.
Welcome back. We are talking about the cultural wars and asking, is the church losing the battle for the culture, and how do we bridge the gap specifically between the older generation who are brought up on biblical values? The church was trusted. It was the moral, it was the pillar and ground of truth. And older generations, we were just told, no, don't do that. And for us, that made a lot of sense. Now we have a generation that has come in that just doesn't want the rules. They want to set up their own rules. They have a completely different worldview. And how do we help them, find a way, know how to operate in this world and not live in their utopian technological worldview? And so let's come back to the conversation. And there is an interesting study you did where you looked at some of the issues that are influencing youth. So I want you to start there. And I think you looked at their values in terms of sexuality, money, I think, whatever else. Yes.
So what happened is that we were just asking young people to tell us what is it they value most.
Okay.
And the sum total of their discussion was 3 things.
Okay.
Money, fun, and sex.
Okay.
And it is coming from a place, first of all, of the poverty they have grown up in. And again, what we were talking about, the things that they see are a possibility. And so they're like, I do not want poverty by all means possible.
Okay.
I have got to have money.
Right.
And however I get it is not the issue. The issue is getting money.
Okay.
But the second thing is also that what we considered safe spaces, like the family, unfortunately is no longer a safe space.
Okay.
As defined by young people. And that doesn't discount the importance of family. I think the problem is that we have sat back perhaps as a society and watched the family become the place of abuse, watched the family become the place of even trauma. And so because of that, a lot of it is acting out of that anger, of that trauma. And they say, you know what, I've been through so much, I am going to medicate. And the feeling of that void is through all those things that I have mentioned.
Okay.
And the third one is the lack of relationship.
Okay.
If there is a generation that has craved relationships, it is this one.
Okay.
Because what's happening is that, again, I feel like the conversations I've had is that when we were growing up, parents were so present.
Okay.
But they feel that parents have abandoned that responsibility as much. And so it is the house help, the TV that is bringing them up. And so a lot of them are craving a relationship they cannot get. And what the parents' response many times is through holidays, through money, gadgets and toys. Okay?
Yeah.
And so the response then to that is we have so many young people who are not parented adequately that a lot of these things are then acting out. So I'll give you an example. In the places where I teach at the university, yes, but I interact a lot in trainings and so forth. So sometimes when young people ask for your number, you give them. But a trend I have seen is that some of the young men are so unparented, not just young men or even young women, those young people are so unparented that they're looking to have relationships with older men or women. Nothing necessarily wrong with that if it's a choice, but there's a pattern that we are seeing because in a spouse, so they hope that you will have a romantic or a close and intimate relationship with them to fill the void of the mother or the father.
Okay.
So Generation Zs are getting that pattern a lot. Okay. And so what young people call mubaba or mumama issue, a part of it, apart from using that as a means to get money, is actually to fill the void, the parenting void.
Yes.
So that response is quite worrying for me. Then young people, again, to keep up with the trends, is living beyond their means. So if you actually do a calculation of, just this morning, I was giving a presentation where we saw the statistics, over 50% of what we call digital lending platforms, over 50% is young people under 35 that are borrowing, but they are borrowing for consumption, you see, so that they can live beyond their means. They need to look like, you've had these conversations about personal branding, and I need to look the part, I need to fake it until I make it.
Right, yeah.
So what that means is I have to do everything possible to look like what I am not, so that I attract what I would like. Okay, and so a lot of it is masking a lot of, so, and then you find that in doing these things, we're now, of course, to keep up, they are now getting into very toxic behavior. And that's what we are saying. By the time we reach them, it's almost too late. And so you want to have that healthy basis. Then the issue around fun is that, again, they're pushing the boundaries. So they don't want to live with rules, but all we know to do is give rules. And it's institutions across board. It's the church, it's the government, it's parents at home, you know. Everywhere they go, there are rules. And so they're like, we are rebelling against rules. And part of that rebellion is pushing the boundaries. So how, in fact, if you tell a young person, don't, you have, what they hear is do.
Okay.
And they will go to every extreme level you can imagine. They say, let me experience what I'm being told not to do. And then I will now find out for myself. And then I will come back now and decide after I have experienced.
Yes.
So for example, the murky issue of LGBT, my message to the church is, there is the institutional issues we have to think about and policy. But young people are experimenting. And we are not having conversations about, why do we say no to not having sex before marriage? Why do we say no about not testing? You know, that I was told by one young person, we must test the engine before we say I do, because you don't know if it works. You see? And they are very honest.
And it's a very, very serious, valid, you know, concern. And it's becoming like normalized.
It is normalized. And what they're saying is, the people telling us, talk to us as if they never made mistakes.
Okay.
And so when the bishop, for example, or the pastor, or the pastress for that matter, tells me don't.
Yes.
I don't hear that. I want to know, what mistakes did they make?
Okay.
So that we have an honest conversation. I need to see them as a human being. I need to learn from them, because it is in that authentic conversation that I will hear and process and learn from their mistakes, and then decide not to do what they have told me not to do.
Wow.
So they're asking us to be more honest with them.
What young people are looking for, if I hear you right, is authentic people.
Yes.
Authentic relationship, and people who are willing to say, I made mistakes.
Yes.
Because I thought it was so clever. I was your age, 20-year-old. I thought, look, all these people are confused. I am the only one who knows what's going on. And I made mistakes. So they want to relate to real human beings, because after all, by the way, like we were saying before, you know, in the last, you know, before we went to the break, about the whole technology, these guys live in a world of make-believe.
Yes.
Watching videos constantly. So they don't really interact with real human beings. So if a pastor or a teacher or a mother is going to sit with their daughter or son and tell them, hey, man, I've played that game. I really, that night was a bad night.
Yeah.
And then the person will actually have their eyes open.
Yeah.
You know, they will see that actually, if these older people could make that mistake, then perhaps we are fooling ourselves.
Yes.
Exactly.
Actually, my now 8-year-old, I was parenting the way I was parented, don't and do.
Yes.
And they're asking questions that are a bit uncomfortable. And I remember just in doing this work, I got a conviction. I need to start parenting differently. And I remember she asked a question, which I cannot remember now, but it was on and I actually told her, imagine, Mom, I don't know. And then she's very theatrical. She says, whoa, if my mother doesn't know, we are doomed. But I noticed that my relationship with her changed.
Yes.
Because she started actually having engagements with me, and I almost gave her permission to look at me as human.
Yes.
And then I remember 8. Now, when she was 7 and the sister was 5, they started talking to me about boys. Of course, I'm crumbling within. I'm like, why am I having a conversation about boys with toddlers? But I realized if I don't engage at this point, I lose them and they will never confide in me.
Okay.
And so young people are saying we also need safe spaces where we can be heard without judgment.
Okay.
So when they tell me this is how I process love, I have got to redefine to them what love is. And in fact, just a girl I was talking to before I came on set told me, you know, the worst part about Christians, because she has her parents are pastors.
Yes.
And she said, I've been sexually active, even if I know what my parents' heart is.
Yes.
But it is because they are not, in a sense, engaging with me from a point of view of what is a healthy boy-girl relationship about.
Yes.
All I'm told is don't play with boys. But I like boys.
Yes.
And what we must agree is that actually it's healthy to like boys or
Yes.
to like girls. You see, it's healthy because that's how God created us, right?
Yes, yes.
But so we have gone so far, and the thing is, we parent with our fears.
Yes.
So we are so afraid of our children getting pregnant, and they have picked that up. So what they tell us is, pregnancy peke yake ndio mnaogopa. Twende kazi. So they are over-consuming on emergency contraceptions.
Yes.
Because then they're like, let's help you hide the shame.
Yes.
But we will not stop engaging in this.
Okay.
And so they're really calling us out. They're saying, if, for example, I go to a pastor's office to say, this is what is going on at home, the pastor is too busy, or the pastor here is just anyone in the church.
Yes.
And in fact, some of them actually make sexual advances. And so that lack of trust, the fact that the place they go to refuge is the very place that breaks their trust, becomes a problem.
And again, maybe I can throw in something on top of that. The fact that this information, so it's like everybody is checking with everyone else how things are spanning out through these rapid, WhatsApp groups and all that. So something small happened in a little corner in a church in some dark side of Nairobi, and it is public knowledge the following morning. Perhaps.
And it becomes now the church. Your church didn't do that, but pastors and the church, you're all lumped together.
Exactly.
Also because they feel jaded by the fact that we are not being each other's keeper. So if I know, for example, a church that is not preaching the true gospel of Jesus, what are the mechanisms to ensure that that is done? What are the mechanisms to ensure that maybe a church that is swindling people is called out? And so because they don't see that, they're like, why are you preaching to us to be okay and you're not? We might as well do what we can.
Okay, so let's dig a little bit into that. So these young people have a sense of moral judgment. They think there are rules by which people should be playing. By the way, they are so Christian. They are more Christian than us because they
are authentic. They're actually very authentic.
Yeah, so you dare break their rules, and they will come for you because. And by the way, we did the right thing. We taught them in Sunday school that there are rules to be to guide life and all that. So we taught them that. We read them the stories and Jesus and his antagonism with the people who are not doing the right thing. So they are Christian at heart in terms of their moral framing. So, but then they are also disappointed with that these adults who taught us the rules, they don't keep the rules. So what is going on here? So I think that's one of the things that we need to, we are talking about how young people are getting disconnected with the older, moralizing generation of parents and leaders and everybody. They just can't get it. Okay, so, however, so let's go back to this place where are these guys now drawing their values properly? On sexuality, spirituality. There are a lot of now motivational books, a lot of books on stoicism and all kinds of ideas coming from the West and everywhere. Where are young people drawing their values from? So
I'll answer your question in two parts. The first one is a coping mechanism.
Yes.
The coping mechanism is that you have in every young person 3 different versions of them.
Yes.
There's the version you as the parent know. There's the version me as the teacher knows.
Yes.
Allow me to say, as a point of authority, they will look to me and they say, oh, you teach us well, you look like you are really friendly, we can tell you. And they can ask because they feel like there's some safety, but they also don't want to be so overt because they still need to maintain a respectful relationship with me.
Yes.
Then there's now the version with their friends.
Okay.
And I'm telling you, if you meet that one person in that version with their friends, you will not recognize your own child.
Yes.
And one thing I'm asking parents is, what version of your child do you know?
Okay.
Okay? So that the first one is the coping mechanism of just, you like me in long dresses on Sunday. I'll be the pastor's daughter on Sunday, or the, or the elder's daughter.
Yes.
But then they're the ones who are ringleading in other things.
Okay.
And so if we provide those spaces, they're telling us that, and if we don't feel judged, if you hear us and help us, we will be able to, and tell us the truth.
Okay.
Tell us the entire truth. Stop sugarcoating. In fact, one young person told me, we know more than you do. It's
Okay.
just that we have to pretend we don't know,
Yes.
so that we cope
Yes.
with their issue. But apart from the coping mechanisms, then how they're drawing their values is that, remember, there are different competing voices.
Yes.
There's the voice of the parent that says don't.
Okay.
There's the voice of, let's say, the media that says, I dare you. Okay?
Yes.
There is the voice of, let's say, TV and pornography that is saying, come on, this thing is fun. You see, there is the voice of the school that is saying, we're going to teach you developmental things, etc. So the point is, and then there's the church is damnation.
Okay.
Hey, nyinyi mnaenda hell. So the point is this, they want to know that there's redemption.
Okay.
But they also then are saying, and my message to the church is, can we be the loudest voice that they hear when they're making that decision? Because we've been so effective. The other one they're crying out for is the parents. And when I talked to the parents told me, we actually don't know how to engage our young people. Okay? Because, for example, a father would say, it is taboo for me to talk to my daughter. Right? And then the daughter is saying, but I want to know the mind of a man, and the only man I know is my father.
Right.
So if you don't engage, you see, it's a lost cause. So how to engage or where to draw the value is, let us be the strongest voice the young people hear. Because other people, the loudest voices that are packaging their information in a more fashionable way, in a more attractive way, in a more enticing way, that's why the trends are the way they are. Okay.
They are causes of this world.
So social media influencers, by the way, play a very big part.
Yes.
And in presentations I actually give such explicit information by some of these people our kids are following that it is just so ridiculous.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the other thing is safe spaces, like I did talk about. They need to know that if I run away from home, I can be received in a church. I'll give you a very sad story. I was doing some work in Western Kenya, and I just happened to see that it's not a traditionally Muslim community, but I just asked, how come there's so much Islamism here? And I was told, go to a church. It is private property. It is locked. But in a mosque, if I don't have anywhere to sleep, I will get food, I will get a place to go to the toilet, I will get a place to sleep. To me, that is the God, that represents God more than the church represents God.
Wow, amazing.
You see? So they are saying, I need to know that I have safe spaces where I can come and just be.
So you're saying, you've saying something very profound, because there are hundreds of churches in the city of Nairobi.
Yes, but they are under lock and key.
There is a watchman at the gate.
Yes.
And if you come in, we are also frisking people. I'm telling you, we are also checking out who comes in. Of course, I don't think whether, given the history of Kenya, perhaps we have reason to be afraid of everyone.
Yeah.
But you've said something very powerful, that if the church is really not a safe space, and it's not necessarily in the woke definition of space, safe space, we're talking about a place where somebody can actually go and sleep.
Yes.
If they didn't have
be
a place
human.
to sleep. Yes.
Be human, even go to the toilet.
Exactly.
Yeah. They say they don't have that. But remember the first church in Acts.
Yes.
Why were they called Christians? Because there was love, because there was unity, because there was fellowship, because there was communion. So, and that really what I'm hearing them saying to us. That the church has become so irrelevant that even treating people as human beings is becoming so difficult. So that safe space is important. The other one, authenticity. Tell us, as ugly as it is, tell us.
Right.
Actually, I hope I will not be offensive by saying this. In one of the interviews I did, this young girl, she's a clergy's daughter. And she said, I was told sex is bad. Until I tasted that thing. It is so good. They lied to me.
Right.
And I can never believe them anymore.
Right.
And so they're saying, please stop sugarcoating the information. Tell us that, because other people, those other competing voices, do not sugarcoat the information.
That's true.
And then obviously give us in a way that is balanced, so that by the time I am done and I'm making a decision, I am empowered and not acting out of fear or out of your agenda.
Okay.
Okay? But that to me sounds like, explain to me things. Explain to me, what is a soul tie? Why are you saying don't? What does it mean? Give me examples of people who have now made it. Then these are the examples they made.
Okay.
I mean, these are the mistakes they made.
Okay.
Things
Absolutely.
like that.
The reality is so complex. So, but I love the idea that you're saying authenticity is what the young people are looking for.
Yeah.
They want to know the truth. They
Yeah.
want to hear it.
Yeah.
They don't want it sugar-coated.
Yeah.
They want to know what's going on.
But also, there is the issue of trauma.
Okay.
A lot of young people are acting out purely out of distress and trauma.
Okay.
And maybe a parent is not able to help. What can we do as a community to bring them back? Actually, as a teacher, I do more counseling than teaching.
Okay.
Because people will just come to me and totally talk to me about, I was teaching about strategy. They come to me and they tell me, this is a problem that I have. How would you go around it? You see, that is trauma. That is somebody looking for an outlet.
Yes.
But where are we? We tell them, pay for it. We tell them, you know, we are not available, we are too busy.
Yes.
And yet, if we want to really save the society, we have got to address the trauma that's going on around with young people.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe you are following this conversation, the trouble in the gap, in the generational gap, and the role of the church. The church must maintain and be the ground of truth. And as we wrap this up, how do you see, and what advice would you give to a pastor that is pastoring largely young people? Because most churches are actually populated by young people.
Yeah.
What are some of the key things they really must pay attention to?
We must restructure differently.
Okay.
Let me tell you, if I was to look at a general church budget, we have so much money going into buildings, going into the adult service. Very little is given to the children and the youth ministry.
Okay.
If you think about it, you actually will not have anyone to hand over to in 10 years.
Okay.
Actually, 10 years is a long time. And so we are not thinking about that intergenerational progression of the church. If you go to Europe, you've seen churches are busier at night when they have a concert than when they have a priest.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
And we are building mega churches, thinking in millions of shillings, and we are not restructuring differently. Young people are now not even coming to the church. So it is the church to go out to those young people.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so it is no longer about buildings anymore. And so that restructuring differently, rethinking ministry has to happen.
Okay.
So for pastors, again, you cannot have this condescending relationship between top-down approach with young people.
Okay.
Like they are saying, we know so much more than you. Just engage us. So for me, for example, as a teacher, I realize that in this knowledge age, people have experiences I don't have. So in essence, they are experts in some aspects that I'm teaching than I am. And so I have to accept to be a facilitator of a conversation and information. And I think it's high time we stop this top-down preaching down to people.
Right.
And actually having conversations, but maintaining the purity, the authenticity, and the accuracy of God's word.
Okay.
Because they actually want to know, why does the Bible say this? Break it down to them. Help them to understand. Give them those authentic conversations where they're allowed to ask questions and their authentic answers. And actually, if you don't know, just say, I don't know. Let me go research. I'll come back and tell you. There's nothing actually wrong. They respect that more than you always positioning yourself as the expert. So we have to just completely restructure differently if we want to have a church in the next 10 years.
Okay. Wonderful. You have been warned. If you're going to have a church in the next 10 years and you want to keep those same young people in your church in the next 10 years, you got to destructure differently. You got to reallocate your resources, reorganize yourself. It's not so much about the structure, the big church, the big cathedral. You will do that. You will build the big structures, but you can't afford to lose the young people. So, and I love this, and thank you so much, Dr. Katindi, for really sharing with us this valuable information. You have been studying young people. and the trades and all that, and you're in that policy space and working with young people. So thank you so much for helping us understand this space. And so I believe the church will win if we stand up for the truth.
Yes.
You believe that? Okay, very good. Thank you so much. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for staying tuned in. I believe you've learned, you've gained a lot of insights. This is the Gigi Report, and we bring you real serious conversation, and I hope that we are enriching you. So make sure you leave your footprints and share with your friends. And until another Friday evening, we'll see you another day. God bless you. Have a great evening, and bye for now.